Real estate never fails. Good luck. I hit send on that text message, my fingers steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. 20 minutes earlier, my husband Darren had just destroyed 15 years of careful financial planning with a single message from his supposed hunting weekend in Santa Fe. The audacity was breathtaking. Not just the betrayal, but the sheer stupidity of putting our entire life savings into some half-baked real estate scheme with his girlfriend. My name is Veronica Hale, and I'm 45 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been the financial backbone of our household here in Tucson, Arizona. While Darren played the charming salesman at Trevanta Corporation, I managed every dollar we earned, every investment we made, every safety net we built. Our retirement accounts, emergency fund, the equity in our home, I tracked it all with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Darren used to call me the brain behind our success, back when he still respected what I brought to our marriage. That respect had been eroding for months, ever since he met Sky Winters at a company networking event. She was 28, blonde, and apparently ambitious in ways that I supposedly wasn't. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. While I was building our financial empire one careful decision at a time, Darren was busy being dazzled by someone who sold condos for a living and thought she was the next real estate mogul. The warning signs had been there. Late nights at the office that smelled like perfume instead of paperwork. Weekend hunting trips that coincidentally aligned with Sky's out-of-town property visits. The way he'd started criticizing my conservative approach to money, suggesting we needed to think bigger and take some risks. I'd ignored them all, foolishly believing that 15 years of marriage and shared success meant something. Now, staring at his text message on my phone screen, I realized just how naive I'd been. Moved our savings to Sky's real estate venture. She's ambitious, unlike you. We're going to flip houses together. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only was he stealing our future, but he was doing it while insulting everything I'd accomplished. But as I sat in our pristine kitchen, surrounded by the life we'd built together, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. Darren had made one critical mistake in his grand betrayal. He'd forgotten that I wasn't just good with money. I was good with contracts, documentation, and the kind of legal paperwork that could protect us from exactly this scenario. Years ago, I'd insisted we both sign documents giving each other co-control over major financial decisions. At the time, Darren had joked that I was being paranoid. Today, that paranoia was about to save my life and destroy his. The foundation of our relationship had always been built on complementary strengths. Darren was the social one, the networker who could charm clients and close deals with his easy smile and natural charisma. I was the strategist, the one who turned his commissions into long-term wealth through careful planning and smart investments. For over a decade, it had worked beautifully. We were the couple other people envied, financially secure, professionally successful, seemingly unshakable. I'd met Darren when I was 30, fresh out of a master's program in finance and ready to build something meaningful. He was already established at Trevanta Corporation, selling industrial equipment with the kind of confidence that made clients trust him instantly. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of expensive dinners and weekend getaways, all funded by his generous commissions. But even then, I'd been the one suggesting we save for the future, invest wisely, think beyond the immediate gratification. After we married, I'd taken over our finances completely. Darren was brilliant at making money, but terrible at managing it. Left to his own devices, he would have spent every penny on the latest gadgets, luxury vacations, and whatever caught his fancy. I channeled his earnings into a diversified portfolio that grew steadily year after year. Our emergency fund reached 6 figures. Our retirement accounts were on track to give us a comfortable life well into our 70s. I'd even started a separate investment account that I privately called our Dream Fund. Money earmarked for the lake house we planned to buy someday. Darren had seemed grateful for my financial management, at least until recently. He'd bragged to his friends about my investment prowess, showing off our quarterly statements like trophies. "My wife's a genius with money," he'd say, wrapping his arm around my waist at dinner parties. "I just make it. She makes it grow." The pride in his voice had made me feel valued, essential, loved. But something shifted after he met Sky. Suddenly, my careful approach was boring. My diversified portfolio was too safe. My emergency fund was dead money that could be working harder. He'd started bringing home stories about Sky's real estate victories, a condo she'd flipped for a $20,000 profit, a commercial property she'd helped a client purchase that doubled in value. Each story felt like an indirect criticism of my methods, a suggestion that I was holding us back from greater success. I'd tried to explain the basics of risk management, the importance of steady growth over speculative gains. But Darren's eyes would glaze over during these conversations, and I could see him mentally comparing my spreadsheets to Sky's success stories. The woman who'd once been his financial genius was becoming his conservative anchor, dragging down his dreams of quick riches and exciting ventures. Now I understood that those conversations hadn't been about investment strategy at all. They'd been about justifying what he was already planning to do. The hunting weekend that changed everything had been planned for months. Darren and his buddies from Trevanta Corporation had supposedly booked a cabin in the mountains outside Santa Fe, complete with guides and all the gear they'd need for what Darren called a real man's weekend. He'd been unusually excited about the trip, buying new hunting clothes and spending hours researching the area online. At the time, I'd been happy to see him enthusiastic about something that didn't involve criticism of my financial choices. The first red flag should have been his reluctance to give me specific details about the cabin. When I'd asked for the address in case of emergency, he'd waved me off, saying the cell service would be terrible anyway, and that I should just relax and enjoy having the house to myself. The second red flag was his insistence on taking our tablet to download some hunting apps, despite his usual complaints that technology ruined the outdoor experience. But I'd trusted him. After 15 years of marriage, why wouldn't I? The text message arrived on Saturday afternoon, while I was reorganizing our home office. I'd been updating our investment spreadsheets, noting the steady growth in our accounts, when my phone buzzed with a message that shattered my world. Moved our savings to Sky's real estate venture. She's ambitious unlike you. We're going to flip houses together. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my brain refusing to process what I was reading. Then I grabbed our laptop and logged into our bank accounts with trembling fingers. The joint savings account that had contained $87,000 yesterday now showed a balance of $300. Our money market account was empty. Even the emergency fund I'd built over 10 years was gone. But it was the second text that truly revealed the depth of his betrayal. Don't bother calling. We're investing in something real for once. Sky knows what she's doing. This is our chance to actually make serious money, instead of hiding it in boring accounts. The casual dismissal of everything I'd built, everything we'd achieved together, hit me like a physical blow. 15 years of careful planning, sacrifice, and strategic thinking reduced to boring accounts. The woman who'd turned his sporadic commissions into genuine wealth was apparently just dead weight holding back his entrepreneurial spirit. I walked to our kitchen window and looked out at our neighborhood. The nice houses, the manicured lawns, the life we'd been able to afford because of my boring financial management. Then I thought about Sky Winters, with her flashy social media posts about luxury properties and her apparent ability to convince my husband that throwing our life savings at her untested business venture was somehow a smart investment. That's when the shock began to crystallize into something much more dangerous. Cold, calculated fury. Darren had made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. Because while he was busy playing real estate mogul with his ambitious girlfriend, he'd forgotten one crucial detail about his boring, conservative wife. I wasn't just good with money. I was excellent with revenge. My first instinct was to call Darren immediately and demand he reverse whatever insane transaction he'd just made. But something stopped me. A voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother, who'd always warned me that the first move in any crisis should be to gather information, not react emotionally. So instead of picking up the phone, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. I took screenshots of our emptied accounts, saved copies of Darren's text messages, and pulled up our banking history to trace exactly when and how the transfers had occurred. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The transactions hadn't happened today during his supposed hunting trip. They'd been executed on Thursday afternoon, just hours before he'd left for Santa Fe with his overnight bag and hunting gear. He'd drained our accounts and then lied to my face about going hunting with his friends. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into the transfer details. The money hadn't gone to any legitimate real estate investment company. It had been wired directly to a personal account belonging to Sky Winters. Not her business account, not a corporate investment fund, her personal checking account, which meant this wasn't even a real business venture. It was either a personal loan to his girlfriend, or, more likely, his way of funding their new life together while leaving me with nothing. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision made during a romantic weekend. Darren had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While I'd been updating our investment spreadsheets and planning our financial future, he'd been systematically preparing to steal everything we'd built together. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone to call our bank. The customer service representative was sympathetic but clear. Since both names were on the accounts and Darren had proper authorization, the transfers were technically legal. They couldn't reverse them without his consent or a court order. The woman suggested I contact a lawyer immediately if I suspected fraud or financial abuse. A lawyer. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up the phone. 6 months ago, after hearing one too many stories about friends getting blindsided by cheating spouses, I'd done something that Darren had mocked as paranoid. I'd consulted with Judith Brennan, one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Tucson. Not because I suspected anything, but because I believed in being prepared for every possible scenario. Darren had laughed when I'd told him about the consultation fee, calling it a waste of money and joking that I was already planning our divorce. Today, that consultation was about to become the best investment I'd ever made. I'd kept Judith's card in my home office filing cabinet, tucked away behind our tax documents where Darren would never think to look. As I pulled it out, I remembered her words from that initial meeting. The key to surviving financial infidelity is moving faster than the cheating spouse expects. Most betrayed partners waste crucial time trying to understand why it happened or hoping for reconciliation. The smart ones protect themselves first and process emotions later. My phone call to Judith was brief and to the point. This is Veronica Hale. We met 6 months ago for a consultation. My husband just stole our life savings and transferred it to his girlfriend. I want to go nuclear. Her response was immediate and reassuring. I remember you. How much money are we talking about? $87,000 in savings, plus whatever he can access from our other accounts. Maybe $150,000 total. When did the transfers occur? Thursday afternoon. He's currently in Santa Fe with his girlfriend, pretending to be on a hunting trip. Perfect. We'll have restraining orders on the remaining accounts by Monday morning. Can you be in my office in an hour? As I grabbed my purse and car keys, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Judith Brennan's office was exactly what I'd remembered from my consultation 6 months earlier. Impressive, but not flashy, with the kind of understated elegance that suggested competence rather than desperation for clients. Floor-to-ceiling law books lined the walls, and her desk was organized with the precision of someone who'd built a career on attention to detail. She was waiting for me when I arrived, having apparently cleared her Saturday afternoon schedule for what she'd already identified as a priority case. "Show me everything," she said without preamble, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I handed over my phone with Darren's text messages and opened my laptop to display the banking records I'd compiled. Judith's expression remained neutral as she reviewed the evidence, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested she'd seen this type of betrayal before and knew exactly how to respond to it. "Your husband made several critical mistakes," she said, after reviewing everything. First, he documented his intent in writing. These text messages show clear evidence of financial abuse and potentially fraudulent misrepresentation of assets. Second, He transferred marital funds to a third party without your consent, which violates the co-control agreements you signed years ago. And third, he's currently out of state, which gives us a window to act before he can make any additional moves. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing notes with the speed of someone dictating strategy to herself. Here's what we're going to do. Monday morning, I'll file for emergency relief to freeze all remaining joint accounts. We'll also request a temporary restraining order preventing him from accessing any marital assets until a court can review the situation. The fact that he transferred money to his girlfriend's personal account rather than a legitimate business entity works strongly in our favor. But it was her next words that made me sit up straighter. More importantly, we're going to subpoena every financial record related to this so-called real estate venture. If Sky Winters accepted marital funds under false pretenses, if this isn't actually a legitimate business investment, she could be facing civil liability for receiving stolen property. The implications hit me immediately. You mean she could be legally responsible for returning the money? Potentially, yes. And if we can prove she knew the funds were taken without your consent, the penalties become much more severe. Judith's smile was sharp and professional. I've seen this pattern before. Younger women who get involved with married men often don't understand they're making themselves vulnerable to legal action when they accept money that isn't rightfully theirs. She continued outlining our strategy, explaining how we'd document every aspect of Darren's deception and build a case that would not only protect my remaining assets, but potentially recover what he'd already stolen. The comprehensive approach was exactly what I'd hoped for. Aggressive, thorough, and designed to catch Darren completely off guard. There's one more thing, Judith added, leaning back in her chair. Your husband's hunting trip alibi actually works in our favor. If he's been posting about his weekend on social media while simultaneously claiming he's in the mountains with no cell service, we can use that to demonstrate a pattern of deception. Modern betrayals leave digital footprints that earlier generations couldn't have imagined. As I left her office an hour later, I felt the strangest sensation. Relief, mixed with anticipation. For months, I'd been watching my marriage deteriorate without understanding why or how to stop it. Now I had a plan, a timeline, and a legal advocate who understood exactly how to turn Darren's betrayal against him. The hunting weekend that was supposed to mark the beginning of his new life with Sky was about to become the biggest mistake he'd ever made. Sunday evening brought the first crack in Darren's carefully constructed narrative. He called just before 8 p.m., his voice artificially cheerful as he described his amazing hunting experience and the huge buck his friend Bradley had supposedly taken down. But I could hear something else underneath the manufactured enthusiasm. Nervous energy, like someone rehearsing a story they weren't entirely confident about. The guys want to stay another day, he said, the words coming a little too quickly. Some opportunity to track this elk that the guides think we can find. I might not be back until Tuesday evening. Of course he wanted to extend his trip. More time with Sky, more time to solidify their plans before facing the consequences of what he'd done. But his transparent lie gave me exactly what I needed. Additional time to implement Judith's strategy before he realized what was happening. That sounds wonderful, I replied, keeping my voice warm and supportive. Make sure you get some good photos for your social media. I know how much you enjoy sharing your adventures. The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Darren had been so focused on creating his hunting alibi that he'd forgotten about the digital trail he'd been leaving. If he'd really been in the mountains with no cell service, how had he been able to send me detailed text messages about real estate investments? And more importantly, what had he actually been posting online while supposedly disconnected from civilization? After hanging up, I spent the evening conducting my own investigation. Darren's social media accounts told a fascinating story. On Thursday, he'd posted a photo of hunting gear laid out on our bed with the caption, "Ready for a real man's weekend in the wilderness." On Friday, there were no posts at all, consistent with being in an area without cell service. But Saturday afternoon, right around the time he'd sent me the devastating text about transferring our savings, he'd posted a photo of an expensive restaurant meal in Santa Fe with the caption, Sometimes the hunting lodge surprises you with amazing food. A hunting lodge with restaurant-quality plating and what appeared to be lobster tail. I took a screenshot and added it to my growing evidence file. But the real revelation came when I checked Sky's social media accounts. She'd been far less careful about maintaining the fiction. Her Instagram story from Saturday showed a champagne toast with perfectly manicured nails and what looked like an expensive hotel room in the background. The timestamp matched exactly with when Darren had sent me his cruel text messages about their real estate venture. I saved everything. Screenshots, timestamps, even the metadata from the photos that would prove where they'd been taken. By the time I finished documenting their weekend, I had a comprehensive record of their deception that would make Darren's hunting trip story completely impossible to maintain. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. I'd spent the weekend moving between fury and calculation, but now I felt something else entirely, the cold satisfaction of having superior information and a better strategy than my opponents. Darren thought he was playing a game where he held all the cards. He'd stolen our money, secured his girlfriend's future, and left me with nothing but broken trust and empty accounts. What he didn't realize was that he'd been playing chess while I'd been preparing for war. At 7 a.m. Monday morning, I was sitting in my car outside Judith's office with a coffee and a folder full of evidence that would turn Darren's triumph into his downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Miss you, babe. Can't wait to come home and share all the hunting stories." I smiled as I typed my response. "Can't wait to hear every detail. I'm sure it will be fascinating." Within hours, Darren would discover that his boring conservative wife had been far busier during his hunting weekend than he could have possibly imagined. Judith's Monday morning blitz was a masterpiece of legal precision. By 10 a.m., she'd filed emergency motions with the family court requesting immediate freeze orders on all our remaining joint accounts. By noon, she'd served Trevanta Corporation with a subpoena demanding all records related to Darren's recent time-off requests and expense reports. By 2 p.m., she'd filed for a temporary restraining order preventing any further transfers of marital assets. But the real devastation came when she served Sky Winters with a civil lawsuit demanding the immediate return of the $87,000, plus interest and attorney fees. "Your husband's girlfriend just learned that accepting stolen marital funds makes her legally liable for restitution," Judith informed me during our afternoon phone call. "Her real estate venture is about to become very expensive." The speed of Judith's actions caught everyone off guard. Darren was still in Santa Fe, blissfully unaware that his financial world was collapsing. Sky was scrambling to find a lawyer to explain how she'd suddenly become a defendant in a civil lawsuit. And I was discovering that revenge served efficiently was infinitely more satisfying than revenge served hot. The first call came from our bank's fraud department, informing me that suspicious activity flags had been placed on all accounts associated with my social security number. The second call came from Darren's supervisor at Trevanta Corporation, asking if I knew why their legal department had received subpoenas related to my husband's recent travel expenses. But the most satisfying call came from Bradley Morrison, one of Darren's supposed hunting companions. "Veronica, I'm really confused," he said, his voice uncertain. "Some lawyer's office called asking about our hunting trip this weekend, but Darren told us weeks ago that he had to cancel because of a family emergency. We went without him. Is everything okay?" Everything was perfect. Tuesday afternoon brought the first cracks in Darren's composure. He called from the road, supposedly driving back from his successful hunting expedition, but his voice carried an edge of panic that he couldn't quite hide. "Veronica, did you do something with our bank accounts? I tried to access our checking account for gas money, and it's showing some kind of restriction." I let the silence stretch for a moment before responding with carefully calibrated concern. "That's strange. I haven't touched anything. Maybe you should call the bank when you get home. You know how paranoid they've become about unusual activity." "Unusual activity?" His voice pitched higher. "What kind of unusual activity?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe large transfers or out-of-state transactions? You know how banks are these days." I paused, then added with perfect innocence, "How was the hunting, by the way? Did you get good cell service up in the mountains? Your text messages came through so clearly." The silence that followed told me he was beginning to understand that his weekend of triumph was about to become something very different. When Darren finally arrived home that evening, I was waiting in our living room with a cup of tea and a manila folder. He looked exhausted, and not from hunting. His designer hunting clothes were suspiciously clean for someone who'd supposedly spent 3 days tracking elk through mountain terrain. "We need to talk," he said, dropping his overnight bag by the door. "Yes, we do." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, Darren. Let's discuss your real estate investment strategy." The color drained from his face as he recognized the legal documents spilling out of my folder. His hunting weekend was officially over, and his education in the consequences of financial betrayal was about to begin. As I reflected on the swift and complete dismantling of his plans, I realized that revenge, when executed with precision and intelligence, was indeed a dish best served cold and efficiently.